All right, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Pravratsky, subbing in for the other Pravratsky brothers, a little under the weather, and we have huge news today. We got the neighboring Sioux Falls City FC just announced as one of the first 5 clubs signing a letter of intent for the WPSL Pro. We've heard these murmurs. We've gotten some great teasers on social featuring Emily multiple times. So we're getting some good shows. Joe and Emily, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got JoeDeMay, sporting director and coach for Sioux Falls. We got Emily Thomas, one of the co-owners. So let's jump right in. One of the 5 initial teams to launch this sort of LOI phase, which is sort of stating your commitment to join the league. The earlier announcements from the league had said that, perhaps full play will start in 2025. Maybe some form of play will start in 2020. Full play might start in 2025. Some form might start in 2024. So let's jump into it. When did these first discussions happen, and sort of how did WPSL Pro end up be the place where you guys wanted to be?
So, when we first started this 2 long years ago, we always had the dream of making this a professional team. And before the first season even ended, we were in talks with, a variety of different leagues. And so, originally it started early. And then I would say for the WPSL, we went to Oklahoma City for our AGM meeting, and it was announced then. And then since that time, it obviously has grown, and the conversations have gotten more and more. And I will let Joe take it away because he kind of has been in those conversations. So
it's definitely our vision. So that made it easier from the sporting director side to kind of know what our vision was. WPSL at the AGM in February they announced the pro intentions for the WPSL Pro League, and then had spoken to us there briefly, and then the conversation really picked up in May, speaking with Sean and Ben O'Nagel, who is with the town and really kind of driving the pro side of things. And once that conversation started in May, it was a pretty consistent stream of communication between us, some regular calls and meetings about the potential for what the league would look like, and the ideas. And really that was the driving force was, a lot of times when you're joining a league, the league comes to you and says, this is how things are going to be done. And part of the attraction of the league was, hey, the founding clubs really need to kind of build this. Let's learn from what other leagues have done, both in the men's and the women's side. There have been some really good ideas, and there have been some really bad practices in all of those leagues. So let's take the best, and then let's make sure that we avoid some of the worst things, so that we can benefit from what's happened before. And so that was the biggest draw to joining the league. And then at some point, there's always that point. It's the Spider-Man meme where everybody's pointing at each other. Like, who's going to go first? Who's going to go first? And I would say that, we were pretty vocal and, hey, we need to do this, because yes, it might only be 5, but like, you're going to get other clubs who join. We're going to be the founders, and then there's going to be some early adopters. And then as things grow, there's going to be some other people who want to join in. So somebody's got to kick it all off. So we said, hey, why not us?
Yeah. And I know you mentioned, Joe, there's maybe folks would have expected a bigger launch group. I think, my conversations I've had behind the scenes with folks of the WPSL and other folks associated, folks should know, I think that the interested group, like the group just outside of this 5 is obviously much bigger than 5, but when people are ready to jump in, when they're not, is always this sort of sensitive thing for each organization, every board, every ownership group. So I think folks should know, maybe not anyone really, really, really right in the Minnesota area, but across the country, there's a lot of teams, at least I've heard murmurs of, who are interested as well. And you talked about sort of the idea that these founding team should really help set sort of the expectation. It's not just a central league setting that expectation, but obviously some certain amount of a core sort of pitch or core understanding is there for folks to be on the same page. What are some of those sort of central principles that, WPSL Pro is sort of leaning on or even leading on in terms of these are core things we know we want to do, and then teams help us shape the rest of the details?
Yeah. And I think just to go back real quickly to your point about the other clubs, there's an investment standpoint to it is, hey, we want to do this, but we want to make sure that we have the investment. And then there's some things with the professional league standards is making sure that the stadium they have is going to fit the professional league standard, or making sure that their ownership structure is going to match it. There's some nonprofit clubs that want to be involved, but you can't be a nonprofit. So those are two key factors for some of the clubs trying to sort through, how they would make it work, and just aren't quite ready yet, but hopefully will be soon. In terms of the core tenets, I think there's two things. One, just the opportunity. I mean, we're obviously there's this big debate this summer about opportunities, right? And what do we need to do? Are we falling behind? And what do they do in other countries? And I think sometimes we want to copy paste what other countries do, and it's not going to work. Like I hear about the European scale, we should follow the European calendars, but we're not Europe. I think we know here in the upper Midwest, that would be dramatically bad. I mean, I think any of us that sat in the U.S. Honduras Men's World Cup qualifier was a cool experience, but we're also thinking, I don't want to do this every week.
Right.
So I just think there's different things like that, just the opportunities. We need more pro pathways. We don't have enough NWSL teams, and that's not a knock on NWSL. They are what they are. But we need more. We have, firsthand, there's too many quality women who play this game in this country who, when they finish college, want more. And the opportunities are very limited, and going to Europe is possible, but it's very difficult to do. So the first one is opportunity. And I think the second one is, I think it's just an extension of one, it's a pathway in to the professional game, and then it's a pathway to progress beyond that. So whether that is going to a higher league, or maybe it is going to Europe, but it's easier to get there because you have a track record as a professional player. But some of the other things are, what can we do for players while they're with us? Can we create internship opportunities? Can we connect them with local employers that are in the field that they want to be in? Can we, as a club or the rest of the clubs, can we provide them opportunities within the game so we get more women? We talk about we want more women involved. So that's something that we can do as clubs, is provide those opportunities for people who maybe, my experience as a pro player is over, but I still want to stay involved. How can I do that? Maybe that's administrative. Maybe it's coaching. Maybe it's something else. So I think those are the big things that we're looking for. The third one is player care. I think obviously that's a big one. Obviously it's a pro league. So how do we make sure that players are compensated and taken care of, and have the safe environments that they deserve, to operate in as a professional. So Emily probably has some other thoughts, I'm sure.
I mean, you hit all three, but I just, for some, I'm sure the people who are listening know soccer, but, for those of you that may be joining for the first time, there are 101 men's professional teams in the U.S. right now through all the levels. And there are currently 12 women's professional teams. And that is just not right. And so, I mean, the whole thing, like what Joe said, with just providing opportunity and access, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. Is we have so many talented women who deserve to play, and they just, 30 get drafted a year, and you have thousands graduating and, leaving and all of that. So yeah, the big thing is opportunity, and then listening to the players, and this is for the players, and we really strive, we have since day one, to make sure the players feel valued, and that's really important.
Yeah, and Emily rocking the nice, let's see, where are we at? We could have been matching. I got it in the background. Emily's rocking it there, the fantastic, I think it was the Pride kit this year, right? And I picked it up when Mark and I were on the ground out in Sioux Falls to see a game. And from your perspective, Emily, you obviously have sort of a cool small ownership group now with a few folks who have really put sort of the blood, sweat, and tears on top of the investment into this to sort of make it happen. And from your perspective, how does the team think about this sort of financial investment side? I know, Joe, you mentioned the idea that, there's the standards that the federation has of like how much, an individual primary owner with X dollars that owns Y% of the team, blah, blah, blah. Those are sort of the nuts and bolts of it. But from your perspective, Emily, how are you all thinking about sort of your ownership group? Does it need to grow, and sort of how that goes in sort of parallel to making these commitments, but maybe sort of showing a little early so that you can bring the commitment versus having the commitment and then doing more? How are you sort of balancing that process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So my husband Eric and I are the owners, and obviously moving to the professional level is a big difference in the financial aspect. And we are currently talking to different investors, we'll talk to our current partners and sponsors and kind of elevate, their part in this with us. And then, we really love our community. And our community has made us get to this point, quite honestly, by showing up and by being there. And so the grassroots thing is a big deal for us. And we'd love every person to be involved. But we're also open to anyone who believes in our mission, who aligns with our core values, something that is, I think, lost a lot of time in the chase of money, perhaps. And so that is something that's really important, is we align ourselves with those who really believe in what we're doing. And so, yeah, we're talking to everybody. We're not going to be, we're an inclusive group.
Right. I love it. I love it, Emily. And everyone in the upper Midwest, everyone who's looking to support some upper Midwest women's soccer, shoot Emily a DM, shoot us a DM. We'll forward it on. We'll make the connection for sure. Absolutely. And there's so many sort of nitty gritty details that maybe have to be settled by the time the team launches. And let's assume 2025 is when everything launches. Everyone's ready to go. Everything, kicks off. One of the sort of specific things that I'm curious about, and it falls into those standards that you mentioned before, Joe, is, obviously venue is one of those things that people talk about. I mentioned earlier, Mark and I were out there to see in person. Right now you're playing in the University of Sioux Falls stadium out there. I actually think it's a pretty nice venue. I think I've seen stadiums where pro teams play, in Europe. I've seen stadiums where pro teams have to play in the US. I don't think it's outlandish to think you actually could play there, but in terms of venue and training ground and all of those facilities pieces, how do you think about questions like that? Is that sort of a let's get our investment group together and then strategize once we feel complete type of thing? Or did you think through what that strategy is in terms of, maybe we bother trying to own a training ground versus owning a stadium versus all the big questions that come with venues, of which I'm terribly aware of how absurd venue situations are. But how do you all think about the venue stuff? And is your current setup something you consider at least as like a placeholder?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. USF Stadium has been awesome. I think fans have a great experience there. Our players love playing there. It's just a really cool environment. And so obviously, and they fit with what the tier 3, standards are.
Right.
And so for sure, we're going to be talking with them. There's also been talks for a very long time about a new stadium being built in Sioux Falls. And that would be really cool to have our own stadium. And so I think right now, obviously the sky's the limit. And like I said, we're very happy with USF, and obviously the talks will continue there, but you never know what a Sioux Falls City stadium might be looking like. So that would be really cool.
I love that. We hear for folks who don't follow the the upper Midwest random stadium nerddom. There is never ending amounts of it. Des Moines has sort of a kind of a quasi public effort to possibly get sort of a stadium downtown ish. Omaha, I know, has some interest in possibly trying to do stadium stuff. Milwaukee has sort of their stadium district in the works. Madison is likely going to try and redo theirs. Let's add Sioux Falls to the list. Let's get some soccer stadium chaos. Let's do it. I like it. And we've talked a few times about sort of the college players who right now, I think it's fairly reasonable to assume that a lot of the targets for this league in terms of players will be the types of players who now end up going overseas either by default or sort of because they have to. A couple of nice Minnesotans featured over here. Annie Williams, actually, shout out to South Dakota, was a stud at South Dakota State. So let's shout out Annie Williams. And then Rashida Beal, currently both playing overseas. I reached out to a few folks. So when we knew the show was going on, I reached out to a few of them just to gauge not these two players in specific, but players in general. There's about 10 Minnesotans playing overseas right now in various leagues. And in general, the thing I heard was obviously, pay needs to be comparable for them to sort of make the jump into a league like this. But just as frequently, players brought up to me some of the things that you two already brought up as well, which is sort of how well is the team resourced? How well are players supported? So things like housing, but also just really basic stuff I think people don't appreciate as fans, like, the treatment facilities, the training facilities, how much players are supported in that way, even like meals, travel, hotels, like the glamorous logistics of soccer travel. And so when you think about, and I will also say too, I think folks should know in terms of summer league teams, Sioux Falls is one of those teams that has tried to make those investments, at your current level where you're trying to, make sure players are resourced and supported, all that stuff. But how do you think about that in terms of being a place that can sort of pitch to those players, recruit, the random Midwest players or players across the country and say, hey, we know you're going over to Germany, Iceland, Sweden, wherever now, we can be a comparable or a better experience for you. And here's why. How do you think about that sort of pitch and what you need to build up to sort of make that sell to possible players?
I feel that what we have done from day one, we've not only just talked about it, but that was really important for our players to feel and be treated like professionals. And so, I mean, for our busing, when we travel to our away games, we hire a motor coach. Like, it's the real thing.
Right.
We pay for their meals on game days. Snacks we provide on the bus. We provide housing. We really want them. We don't want them to be limited by money, because so many times that happens and you miss out on these amazing women who just can't afford it. And
right.
We were talking, or I was talking with a player, and we were just kind of discussing, and she just said there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be a better way to do this. And she's right. And so we have heard back. I mean, the things that we hear from the players from the past 2 years, those things don't go unnoticed. They are very well received, appreciated, and it makes them feel like they're valued, which they are. But to show them that beyond just on the pitch, it says a lot about who we are and what we will continue to strive to always be. Joe, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, I think from day one, the idea was to go professional. So one of the things we were very intentional about is how much can we do at a professional level as possible. There's some things which we just can't do. For instance, we can't pay players. That's impossible. But there are other things we can do that are scalable over time. So yes, we pay for our players' housing, and like when we don't like throw 8 players into a house with 2 bedrooms. It's if there's 4 bedrooms and there's 4 players in that space, and then they're Airbnb, so it's not like some cheap apartment or something. So we do those things, and those are scalable. So now instead of doing it for a couple months, we will have to do the same thing over a longer period of time. And like, we've looked at some strategies. Well, how how can we improve that, and make sure that from a financial standpoint, maybe it's something that we can kind of maximize that aspect of it. But the experience is the big thing. I think, you're always going to have players who, they're players. They want to play. They want to be on the field. They want to play in games. And you understand some players are going to play more than others, and some players are going to play less. And their experience on some level will be, that will tint their view of their experience. But if that's what they come away saying, oh, I wish I should have played more, or I should have played this position, or whatever it is, if it's related to playing time, that's like, well, that's just a natural part of the game. But if they walk away from everything else in the club was first class, okay, then that's what we want, right? And I would say generally the players who walk away don't have too many complaints about the experience, and we ask for their feedback. We changed our training venue this year because we got feedback about our previous that the turf just wasn't good. We're okay, what do we need to do? Like, where do we need to go where there's better turf? And there was a new facility in town with brand new turf, and we made it happen so we could train there. So I think it's those kinds of things. And then, yes, I think, we have an athletic trainer at every training session, travels with us to every game. So when we show, in the pre-professional leagues, the home team trainers coming up to you and it's like, oh, no, thank you. We don't need you. We have our own.
Right.
So those are just little things that, those are little things that we do. They have a world-class training facility. That's what the athletic trainer is there for treatment. And then they can go work out there and do their workouts if they need a workout from us, so we can get. So there's a lot of little things, helping them get jobs in town. Like the top players are in town for, 2 months. So a lot of places, even now, like they don't want to hire you for, 12 weeks, 10 weeks. But like we've, worked with local people and said, hey, we have these players and they need some money to walk around with. Like, can you help out? And the community supported that. So it's not just the on-field experience, for sure. It's the holistic aspect of it. And I think that's what we go for, is like, and now we have proof of concept, right? When we started, it was like, this is what we want to do. And people nod their head and go, okay, like they've heard that line before. But now I'm doing it for 2 years, and, from year 1 to year 2, refining it. Right. And we'll do the same thing again next season. Now, all of a sudden it's like, no, we do this. Like, we don't say this, we do this. And then we can, talk to any player who's played for us and get their feedback on what it's like. So it's the biggest thing. Right.
And I think even though I'm sure anyone watching the show or listening to the show, watches our other stuff, maybe they have context. Just to give some full context on sort of some of the really specific details that Joe and Emily mentioned, at the summer league level, whether you're, there's multiple leagues, whatever league in the upper Midwest, even across the country, it is actually not guaranteed to have things like coach charter buses, meals every game covered by the team, trainers at every training and at games. Like, I feel like maybe if you're just a hardcore soccer fan in general, you might not necessarily appreciate sort of what the norm is and what the bar is in these summer leagues that already exist. So I just want to make sure folks appreciate, like, it's more a rarity than it should be, but it is a rarity. And so that's why Joe and Emily are listing all these things, because it actually is unique still, unfortunately, in the summer league landscape for those to be team provided resources. And so it does mean something to someone like me when I talk to and cover and see, dozens of teams throughout the summer. Like, those are things that you tick off of, like, you have to add those in the column of things the club bothered doing for their players. And so it is just to note that for folks, in case people aren't hardcore summer league nerds like me. Joe, you mentioned.
Thank you for mentioning that, by the way, and for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Like, the whole point. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, and first, for context for people, you'll regularly see a random team either take like a single 13 passenger van. If you ever watch a game and a team has precisely 13 or 14 players, there is a reason that is the case. So when that happens actually quite a bit. And so, like, or when you see, 15 cars in the parking lot, but there's no fans there, a team literally drove themselves across the Midwest to a game. And so just like when you watch enough games, you start seeing these visual cues. And so it does happen.
No, we know it's happened, because we had players drive to Sioux Falls, But I think the whole point of it too is to normalize what we're doing.
Right.
They're all men's teams. That is normal. And so why isn't it for women? And so we really wanted to elevate that and normalize it. And no, everybody else get on board. This is how these players should be treated. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny to see you watch the players who play for us, and they quickly become normalized to it, because they'll walk in and they'll have friends on the opposing team, and the friends will be like, oh my God, like there'll be 1,000 people in the stands, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, like, it's amazing, right? And you've been there, right? The fans are literally right on top. Like if I'm on the bench, I can turn around and talk to the person in the 5th row and like not have to raise my voice to hear, so they can hear me. And they quickly get normalized to it. But then we go on the road, and they're reminded that, oh wait, no, we're not normal. Like
the norm is
like, we got to get ourselves like fired up for this, because you just walk into the stadium and you're just naturally fired up by that environment. So
the norm is 50 to 100 fans, and then when there's a team that has like 200, 300, that's actually a pretty good turnout. And then when you get to a place like Sioux Falls or Green Bay that does like, or Mankato that does like the 500, you have 500, 700 plus fans. Like those are turned up. Like those are good games. And we're talking about travel, so we do need to jump over to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, Emily, and we're going to talk a little bit about the current air traffic in and out of the Sioux Falls Airport, because here's the deal. Kendra, Sean, Benno, I'm speaking directly to you. You're watching, of course you're watching, you watch every show. So here are the markets. This is for Sioux Falls' sake. So for Sioux Falls' sake, we're gonna talk WPSL Pro Landscape strictly for the sake of Sioux Falls. These are the markets where commercial trips are most frequent already. So these are your target markets, WPSL. Here they are. Denver, no brainer. Everyone loves Denver, of course. Chicago, they could support 3 of these teams. So throw a team in Chicago. MSP, so maybe. Who knows? We have Dallas-Fort Worth. We're already covered, baby. There's one of the 5 teams announced is in Dallas-Fort Worth, so we're crushing it. Phoenix. So, hey, go down to the desert. Let's do it. Atlanta, Las Vegas, Nashville. So are there some Tennessee area teams? We'll see. And then this is my favorite. This is, I'm assuming, a very specific route. Sanford, Florida. I don't know, but it exists. So
it's outside Orlando, and unfortunately, Matt, I believe that is only a seasonal flight.
That's a winter. That's if we were doing the European calendar.
So I think we'd be out of luck. Now, what I would say that like if we have people listening and you happen to have a private jet or two and you want to be involved, we are still writing the rules. So we can go above NWSL and we can get rid of any charter restrictions. Sure. And we can just charter ourselves out of the Sioux Falls Regional Airport. No problem.
I like it. We don't need to limit ourselves.
That's right.
As Emily said earlier, sky's the limit. And guess what? I'm assuming if you throw some private jets at Sioux Falls City, guess what? You might even get to be able to be the jersey sponsor. We don't know. I'm priming that deal for Emily. I'm priming it.
Thank you. Right. Yes, there would be a lovely logo on the plane. That would be super cool.
It's all gonna work. It's all gonna work. So we did mention in the social media post, and for folks who have seen the announcements. So the 5 teams that got announced at this point. The town, which is out in the Bay Area in California. We have a team down in Dallas-Fort Worth, one in Austin, one in Oklahoma City, and then Sioux Falls. So obviously right now that's a big footprint. So we'll see how that goes. But obviously more teams to be announced. Just when we talk travel, just know that this is going to be like something of a national footprint for folks who are trying to track it. And then for you all with the current team, so you obviously have been a couple seasons in the WPSL at the sort of the current WPSL level. When you think about sort of that current roster, or even just the current WPSL, is the idea to sort of keep that as a good option, as a summer league option for college age players, and then just add pro on top? Or how are you thinking about all of this in relation to your current WPSL squad and players?
I mean, the goal is to have both, to have both of those teams. Because what a great feeder to the WPSL pro team is to have those WPSL players, but then also, our whole, our one of the reasons why we did this was to elevate soccer in the area and give, our local talent, our, girls from not only the state of South Dakota, but the surrounding areas, the ability to train and play at an elite level. And then to also be ready for their colleges, for their college seasons when they go back. So it seems to me, and Joe and I have talked about this, but it's kind of a no-brainer to have both teams. And you're just giving more opportunities to more young women and girls.
Yeah, I think there's two stories. One, I mean, Haley Fisher she played South Dakota State, graduated last year, local player, grew up in Hartford, South Dakota. And when we started talking to her, she's like, I had opportunities to play WPSL, but my dream was always to play for a team in my hometown. And they never happened. Her dream was to play WPSL in her hometown. And she got to realize that for 2 years. Emily's daughter, Taylor, wanted more opportunities. So actually left home during high school in search of those opportunities to make them happen. Because again, locally there weren't the references. So now we've provided that, like, you've seen it with the Aurora, the autograph alley at the end of the game. And you see that the young girls and even the boys come up and the players, they haven't really established their names yet, but locally they're big deals. Right. And they're kind of icons to these young people. Yeah. Now to say, hey, it's not just WPSL that you can aspire to, like you can become a pro. And that's something for those players to work toward. So I think from that aspirational standpoint, for sure. And then as Emily made, it's a no-brainer to bring players in the summertime. Some of them, that's going to be the end point. They just want to be ready for college, and then they're going to graduate and they're going to go on to, whatever their major is, or they're going to start adulting. And then you've got the other ones who, they want to try to make it. So like we want to be able to provide both of those things. And I think most players, as like, again, your experience, locally, the players want a serious environment. They want to have fun, but they want it to be serious as well. Whether they want to be a pro or whether they're just spending their summer preparing for their college season. And so that's what we want to provide, something for all players, whether, they just want to be in shape for college and be ready for the fall, or whether they want more after they graduate. Right. Having both is, like Emily said, a no-brainer. Right.
Well, and I think as much as there can be an overlap in terms of someone being so good on the WPSL team that they're good enough to be on the pro team, that's one thing. But I think otherwise there's a lot about the experiences that are also different. So it does serve different pools sort of in its own moment too. And I think one thing I'm curious about is, obviously this is maybe the most chaotic era of prospective women's sports leagues and teams and expansion and hypotheticals of so many either announcements or possible leagues or whatever going on in the next, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, whatever it would be. But I think one thing, we called out on Twitter in particular is just that, and you mentioned it, Emily, that just at this exact moment, there's no second professional tier in the US for women. There's actually no paid reserve, space for even NWSL roster players to go to. Even though there are sort of named and official sort of reserve teams, they are not sort of the paid professional players in those situations. And so I think I'm really curious for you all, how do you think about the possibility of WPSL Pro being sort of a place either, where you are that kind of feeder to, and you mentioned it earlier, Joe, that feeder to other professional opportunities, or even just a place where maybe there could be sort of a direct partnership with, a place like an NWSL where, someone from Kansas City needs some games, they go up and play in Sioux Falls, or someone from the Red Stars or whatever it is. How do you think about that element of it in terms of a possible proactive partnership with a league like the NWSL?
I think, as you said, it's chaotic at the moment and you're not really sure. So I think one of the things, you ask some questions about like this, like, okay, how do you get the investment, or do you start to try to, solidify stadium and train? Like you've got to be super flexible in this space right now. So I think to have too many concrete plans that like it has to be done this way, I think you're going to end up in trouble.
Right.
So to even predict, are there going to be NWSL reserve teams? I don't know.
Right.
You hear rumblings of MLS, like they get pressure to get involved in women's soccer somehow. What does that look like? Is it a joint effort with NWSL? Do they do something like they did with USL and create MLS Next Pro? Nobody knows. So I think again, Emily's kind of said this a few times, but like we're open to all opportunities. We have our vision of what we want it to be. So I think those are more principles. These are the principles we want to operate, and we have less maybe, to use a soccer phrase, we have less tactical rigidity. We want to play this style, but how we're going to do that, we'll adapt as the game goes on. We'll see what kind of players we have. We'll see what the opponent's doing, and then we'll kind of figure it out from there. But we know we want to play this stuff. So we know who we are and what we want to be, and where we want to go. But what that path looks like, I don't know. We've got the address typed into the GPS, but it's that green space that pops up when it says you're not on a road. And you're just driving along. And you're like, I'm sure the GPS will pick back up again at some point and tell us where to go.
Everybody take out your equal time bingo cards and check the box for tactical rigidity. We've gotten a coach on the mic. We've made the check box. And Emily, for you, Joe, we're going to out you. You're an import. You come to South Dakota with plenty of support for them, just like us. You're bringing your chops from all the places you've been across the country. Emily, you're bringing some hardcore South Dakota chops. So for you, as an owner in a state like South Dakota, where there's plenty of random minor league men's teams that are professional, there's plenty of these random connections, but it's not a place that's sort of overrun with pro level, either men's or women's side. So for you, what does it mean? Just lastly, sort of what does it mean to have your club sort of planting this flag to say we want to bring this level of pro sports to South Dakota and women's pro sports?
I mean, I've been just jumping around all day because like today was the day, and it was actually real. It was happening. And, when we said it a couple years ago, it was always sometime we want to do this. And, just the way that things happened, the way that, everybody just really jumped in feet first, like all in, to join us on this. It made everything like, yes, this is our why. We know our why. We've always known our why, and we stick with it. Things happened way quicker than what we thought. But, I mean, one of our like inspirations is the Arc in Sioux Falls, and the whole premise behind that is taking the leap. And so, partners have taken the leap with us, and so we know what we're doing is needed. We know what we're doing is really important, and we feel that the way we're doing it is very important. And I think to be the first professional women's team in South Dakota, like, did I ever think I'd say that? Wow.
Yes, you did. Don't lie.
Cool. It's amazing. I mean, it really is. And I'm just so excited because, South Dakota is known as a flyover state, and people aren't going to fly over anymore. We're going to make it a destination, and it's going to be a destination for soccer. And it's amazing. And it's so funny because I don't know if you know the history with JoeDeMay, but like he was the reason.
Emily froze.
Oh,
really? Oh no, I got you. You.
Okay.
That's the perfect time. I will say as my outsider, while Emily's on pause,
Joe,
I will say,
Joe,
tell me who said this.
I'm not
She's
frozen.
For me.
Oh,
She's
now
playing
you are.
For me,
Okay.
Joe.
You were frozen for me. Sorry, I apologize. You were frozen for me.
Keep going, Emily. Tell the Joe story. Tell the Joe story.
No, that's what I was trying to do. Cut that off.
Well, so a long time ago, it feels, it it was Joe who contacted Taylor to come to Shattuck. And so I knew Joe. I was terrified of Joe for a very long time.
Me too.
But, I also, Taylor doesn't really speak highly, or like, she does. She speaks highly of coaches, but she spoke very highly of Joe and had always dreamed of playing for him. And as her journey kind of led us on a very scenic route, as we like to call it, we learned the ups and the downs and the goods and the bads of many, many different clubs and organizations. And we also got to know Joe a little bit throughout the way, because he was always very supportive and always wanted the best for Taylor. And with that, like when we decided to do this, Joe was the first one that we called just to like pick his brain. We were going to pick his brain and learn as much as we could from him.
Right.
And then I got a text from him asking me a question. And I just looked at Eric and I go, oh, he's totally interested. And we knew that, this is something that he has wanted, and to share the vision and now to come full circle and like be doing this together. It's like so freaking cool, like how things work out, like you're going through some shit along the way, excuse me, but to see where we're at now and what we're doing now is like, it's amazing.
Well, you mentioned Taylor getting recruited to go play at Shattuck, which of course was a standout program down in Faribault, Minnesota. Now Taylor has a second sort of bizarre third degree Minnesota connection for people. And this is where we go full nerd. Coach Kampanen was at St. Thomas, a former Gopher player, is now on staff at Florida Gulf Coast. And look who transferred down to play in Florida with her than Taylor Thomas. So we have another good Minnesota overlap for the Thomas family. So this is the reason why we said on Equal Time, if once Sioux Falls launches, if Madison makes their leap to the Super League, these neighboring teams, guess what? If you go pro in a neighboring state, we're going to adopt you, baby. You're coming on. We'll pretend you're Minnesotans. You'll be honorary Minnesotans. We'll be honorary Wisconsinites and South Dakotans. So very excited for Sioux Falls City. If folks want to keep following you, if they want to find ways to support you, what's a good way for random Equal Time followers and listeners to engage with Sioux Falls City?
We have obviously our website, SiouxFallsCityFC.com, or we have a phenomenal social manager. Joel is incredible. And we are Twitter, or X, whatever it is, and Facebook and Instagram. So whatever age you are, we've got you covered. We're working on the TikTok. So,
That's the stuff. I like it. Well, sporting director and coach JoeDeMay, one of the co-owners, Emily Thomas. Exciting day. Sioux Falls City FC announces one of the 5 initial LOI teams for WPSL Pro. Always happy to support fantastic soccer in the upper Midwest. We're willing to blur the lines for some of these great programs. So thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.